Beijing, I'm Li Jianhua. Today marks the traditional Chinese festival of Laba, which is celebrated on the 8th day of the 12th month of the Chinese lunar calendar. It's regarded as a prelude to the Chinese Lunar New Year. And in today's program, we present to you CGTN's special year-end program, China Chronicles 2022, where we look back on the year of 2022 and look ahead to the coming 2023. And before we start our special program, here's a look at the top news. Chinese President Xi Jinping says that China aims to strengthen strategic cooperation with Russia to benefit the people of both countries. He made the comment on Friday during a video conference with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. Xi noticed that bilateral trade between the two countries hit a new high in the first 11 months of the year. He stressed that the two countries should use the existing mechanism to push forward cooperation in areas including the economy, energy and agriculture. He added that the two sides should also deepen people-to-people exchanges and ensure the successful implementation of the Year of Sports exchanges. Xi expressed that under China's optimized COVID prevention and control measures, the country is willing to cooperate with different nations, including Russia, to resume personnel exchanges. President Xi stressed that the world is again at the crossroads of history, and China is willing to work with other countries to fight against unilateralism, trade protectionism, and bullying. For his part, Vladimir Putin said Russia congratulates China on its remarkable development achievements under the leadership of President Xi. He noticed that Russia is ready to strengthen cooperation with China in various fields and make constructive efforts to establish a more just and reasonable international order. The two heads of state also exchanged views on the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Xi emphasized that China appreciates that Russia never refused to resolve the problem through diplomatic talks, adding that China will continue to play a constructive role in the peaceful resolution of the crisis. And Qin Gang has been appointed as China's new foreign minister. Qin, who is currently the Chinese ambassador to the United States, will be replacing Wang Yi. And 2022 is a crucial year for the Communist Party of China as it has embarked on a new journey to pursue modernization that is different from that of the West. Chinese modernization was discussed at the 20th CPC National Congress held in October. CGTN's Zhao Yunfei explains how the theoretical guideline is helping the party to pursue future development.
The Communist Party of China has set a new blueprint for the nation. The 20th National Party Congress was held in Beijing in October, a historic gathering for the world's largest governing party. Xi Jinping charted the course for future. For the first time, the CPC systematically explained the Chinese modernization. The theory was raised as Xi spoke of an unusual and extraordinary past 10 years during which the party withstood risks, challenges, and trials in the political, economic, ideological, and natural domains.
It marks the 10 years of China's historic and outstanding achievement in the new era. For example, the high-speed economic development and also the stability of the society, and also the outstanding energetic situation showed in the Chinese social-political situation are actually all considered into the concept of Chinese modernization.
The Chinese modernization contains multiple fronts, from seeking common prosperity to protecting environment, from advancing socialist culture to pursuing peaceful development. China is a developing country with more than 1.4 billion people, a number larger than the population of all developed countries combined. The modernization is a pursuit of a unique path in the Chinese context. The party has set a detailed timeline to realize the Chinese modernization by the mid-century point. Such mission has passed on to the new leadership, the 20th CPC Central Committee. Xi says the party will always act for the people after he was re-elected as the General Secretary at the first plenary session of the new Central Committee. The 20th CPC National Congress is a major political event for the party. Lectures and learning lessons have been held on the grassroots levels across the nation.
This is the report delivered by Xi Jinping at the opening session of the 20th CPC National Congress. It's a thick book that covers the party's considered planning for the country's future development in a changing global landscape. The CPC says the National Congress marks the beginning of a new journey, and the event has provided the 96 million party members with guidelines to work towards a better future. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, for both the world and China, the outgoing 2022 has been critical in bridging the past and the future. Now let's have a quick look at some of the highlights of China's diplomacy this year. In January, Wang Yi's first visit of 2022 was to Africa. In June, China hosted the 14th BRICS Summit. The group issued the Beijing Declaration, pledging to safeguard world peace and security. In September, President Xi Jinping attended the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Uzbekistan, calling for unity and cooperation. 2 months later, President Xi went to Indonesia for the G20 summit, where he called for joint efforts to meet global challenges. He then attended the annual APEC meeting in Thailand. In early December, Xi Jinping and a number of Arab leaders took part in the first China-Arab State Summit, aiming to boost the China-Arab relations. And this year, China built deeper ties with Russia, saying there is no upper limit for China-Russia cooperation. And China has continued to pursue a partnership with Europe. She has over 20 phone calls and meetings with European leaders and met German Chancellor Olaf Scholz in person in November. 2022 is also an eventful year for China and the US. President Xi has 2 calls with US President Biden, and they also had a face-to-face meeting in Bali. For more details of what's happened between the 2 powers over the past year, and here is our reporter Nathan King.
In early 2022, the Biden administration signaled it would not just continue Trump-era tariffs on Chinese goods, it would escalate economic pressure on China. In February, the US government tightened export restrictions on Chinese companies, adding more than 30 to the so-called unverified list. A March 18th video call between President Xi Jinping and Joe Biden sought to stabilize relations. It also served as a chance for President Biden to reaffirm the One China policy over Taiwan. But in May, the US State Department changed the language about the island on its website. The mixed messages over Taiwan continued through 2022. Biden stated Washington would defend Taiwan in the event of a conflict for a 4th time since last year. And while high-level contacts in May and June talked about cooperation over global issues like climate change, the US continued to tighten economic sanctions against China, banning Xinjiang cotton exports to the US and advance semiconductors and related technologies to China. The nearly 2.5-hour call in July between Xi and Biden was candid. Xi said the One China principle is the political foundation of US-China relations. Beijing officials later expressed deep reservations over the planned visit to Taipei by second in line to the presidency, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
China requests the U.S. abide by the One China principle and the 3 joint Sino-U.S. communiques, avoid arranging Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, cease official interaction between the U.S. and Taiwan, and stop creating factors contributing to the tension in the Taiwan Strait.
Pelosi's trip went ahead anyway in August, leading to heightened tensions and a decline in cooperation between the 2 capitals. In September, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his US counterpart Antony Blinken at the UN in New York, an opportunity for more tough talk with Washington over Taiwan. The next month, the US government restricted Chinese access to advanced semiconductor chips and the equipment to make them. But as the year ended to a close, the first face-to-face meeting between the 2 presidents in Bali, Xi said the US and China need to explore the right way to get along with each other. Both sides resumed cooperation on climate change. The US exempted hundreds of Chinese products from punitive tariffs, and China agreed to have US-listed Chinese companies audited by US regulators. But as we enter the new year, there are signs of a deepening diplomatic engagement between Washington and Beijing. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to have a trip to China early in the new year. There's been renewed contacts between the Defense Departments of the US and China, and on the commerce level as well. But even though the Biden administration have abandoned the language of American first, well, essentially that policy continues. Nathan King, CGTN, outside the White House.
And for more, we are joined by Professor Wang Xinsong. He is from the School of Social Development and Public Policy at Beijing Normal University. Professor, welcome to our program. So, Professor Wang, we have been talking about great rejuvenation, and the Chinese modernization is considered very important to it. So, what exactly is the Chinese modernization, and what role do you think it plays in China's achievements of its great rejuvenation?
Well, I think the Chinese-style modernization that was raised in the 20th Party Congress report speaks very much about a very important feature of Chinese traditional culture, which is balance. And so if you look at the Chinese-style modernization and details, they talk about the balancing between the development of materials and development of culture, development of one social group versus the other social group, development of human beings versus nature, and development of one nation versus other nations in terms of mutual respect and equality. So balance is a very important keyword in the Chinese-style modernization. And the details of modernization in the Chinese style are not so much different from the modernization objectives of other countries. But when it comes to the means to reach those objectives, China does have some successful experiences to learn from itself. So for example, if you look at the reform and open up era in the 1980s, when China opened it up, China didn't have anybody to learn from. China didn't have a perfect example. The Soviet Union wasn't a perfect example, not the US, not other countries. Nonetheless, China was able to learn from the international best practices, as well as combining from the Chinese own reality. So that combination of the international practices and the Chinese own conditions is one magic bullet that I think China makes China successful in terms of economy. So if one asks about Chinese modernization, I would say pragmatism and flexibility in the policy and political processes are very important, because that makes the bureaucracy and policymakers constantly watch for what works, what doesn't, what needs to change, what needs to keep. All kinds of things need to be watched very constantly so that we can make adjustment according to the reality.
But how is it different from the West modernization? And we have been saying it is quite different. And over the past year, in 2022, China has seen a slew of diplomatic activities. Do you think that China is participating more in world governance?
Oh, definitely. I think the Western modernization has its own unique historical and cultural path, and China differs a lot. China does learn from many of the practices from the West, but China nonetheless integrates its own conditions into this process. Now, when it comes to diplomacy, 2022, especially the latter half of the 2022, speaks a lot about the importance of the presidential diplomacy. Because the heads of states are very important representatives of the national power and the national culture, and when they go out and meet their counterparts in other countries or through the summits and forums, the personalized diplomacy is very important in building up trust and cooperation opportunities. And if you look at the pre-pandemic period, President Xi Jinping actually made slightly over 14 foreign trips on an annual basis, which makes it on par, if not slightly over, the frequency of foreign visits by his counterparts. So when President Xi visited all these places and with all these important international figures, that speaks a lot about how China is coming back to the international arena. And looking forward to 2023, I think there will be even more important occasions where the heads of states and other political leaders of China are going to meet their counterparts over important occasions.
China will have a lot to look forward to in 2023. Thank you very much. That is Professor Wang Xinsong from Beijing Normal University. And the Chinese economy proved resilient this year despite global supply chain disruptions and a contraction in domestic demand. The economic aggregate for the whole year is expected to exceed $17 trillion. Economic growth slowed to 0.4% in the second quarter amid strict measures to combat extensive COVID outbreaks. But there was a 3.9% rebound in the third quarter. China's industrial added value grew by 3.8% in the first 11 months compared with last year. High-tech industries, including new energy cars and solar cells, saw substantial growth. Fixed asset investment grew by 5.3% from January to November. Investment in manufacturing, infrastructure and high-tech industries increased rapidly. And China continues to open up and foster cooperation with other global economies. In the first 11 months, foreign direct investment into the Chinese mainland grew by over 12% to top $178 billion. In the same period, imports and exports increased by 8.6%. Trade with partners in the Belt and Road Initiative grew by more than 20%. And for more, let's go to my colleague Kate Kui in Beijing. Kate, very good evening to you. So please give us a brief summary of the country's economic performance over the past year and what can we expect for the next year?
Right, Jianhua, I'm now currently in Sanlitun area in Beijing. Well, the economic recovery is widely expected in China in 2023. Well, GDP growth number in China next year, as street estimate indicates, is somewhere between 4 to 5% or even higher. On top of this economic recovery expectation, there are three numbers that we should probably watch out. First of all, China GDP will exceed US $20 trillion, while US is expected to achieve 25 trillion GDP next year. The gap between these two countries further shortened. Well, secondly, China per capita GDP will likely exceed $15,000 and get ready to surpass the middle income trap. Finally, in 2023, the total market size of China's consumer retail industry will hopefully surpass the United States and become the largest domestic market globally. Well, China emphasized its dual circulation strategy earlier, so the domestic market demand is critical to support the economic recovery post-COVID-19. Internationally, while China reopens, we will be in a much better position to boost international trade while providing more global supply chain support. However, as we step on the recovery road, we should also be sober and aware that we are indeed facing many challenges. For instance, retail numbers are still declining in December, and industrial output growth number, as you mentioned earlier, falls short. And most importantly, consumer confidence needs to be further restored. All these will only gradually get better with consistent policy guidance. And if you look back in 2022, the policies including regulations on platform economy, adjustments to guide healthy development of real estate sector, and support to facilitate new energy industry, as well as smart manufacturing growth in China, are indeed gradually reshaping our economic structure and growth emphasis. While the real estate portion will definitely be less pronounced in our economic growth in the future, and the growth engine will gradually shift to technology innovation, smart manufacturing, and clean energy for a more sustainable growth. Well, some are saying that we felt the pain in 2022, and some are questioning whether these policies are too aggressive. In my view, in 2022, together with pandemic impact, the temporary pain was definitely more obvious. However, these policies will eventually benefit the long-term healthy growth of Chinese economy. As long as during the execution process, our property rights are properly protected, market mechanism is in place, and a consistent, steady policy guidance can always be expected. So all in all, spring is definitely around the corner, and we will be better in 2023. Jianhua, back to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the well-rounded review of the past year economically. Thank you very much. That is Kate Kui in Beijing. And you are watching China 24. We'll be back after the short break. Stay tuned.
In 2022, China embarked on a new journey filled with challenges and successes. Following the 20th CPC National Congress in October, the country is taking new strides on the Chinese path to modernization. 2022 has been a year with many breakthroughs. We've seen pioneers pushing the boundaries, reaching new heights, and creating new opportunities. Some have brought home medals, while others have built a home in space. But China has also faced many challenges and uncertainties in 2022, from battling COVID outbreaks to promoting trade and economic recovery. Despite hardships and sacrifices, the Chinese nation continues to push forward, never losing hope. China Chronicles 2022. We look back on the journey of the year 2022 only on CGTN.
Welcome back. The COVID pandemic has been another ever-present word for the past year, and finally, after 3 years of painstaking effort, the nation relaxes COVID control measures and stepped into the post-pandemic era. For more, our reporter Biran joins us in the studio. Biran, so please walk us through China's endeavors to prevent and control the epidemic.
Yes, Jianhua, in the past 3 years, China has experienced multiple stages over the fight in coronavirus pandemic. China has announced it will manage COVID-19 with measures against Class B infectious disease instead of Class A virus management in a major shift of its epidemic response policies. The National Health Commission says China will also drop quarantine measures against infected people and stop identifying close contacts or designating high and low risk areas. Local communities nationwide made vigorous efforts to find outbreaks and to protect their residents by offering professional medical care, charity work, as well as a very systematic life supplies network. From 2020 to 2022, China has set up 320,000 community and village-level public health committees. By the end of 2021, over 970,000 grassroots-level medical care centers were opened. And mass vaccination, as one of the vital parts coping with Omicron, China has administered a grand total of 3.46 billion doses as of December 21st, 2022, according to data from NHC. After 3 years, the rate of severe cases in China has diminished gradually from 16.47% in 2020 to the current 0.18% in 2021. China has been optimizing its virus response over the last 3 years. Multiple policies were adopted to better guide the pandemic prevention and control effort. During the fight against COVID-19, the Chinese people have experienced many significant moments. There were tears, challenges, but most realized the greater need to unite and win this battle. China has optimized its viral prevention measures to step into the post-epidemic era and has put in place several safeguards to avoid large numbers of deaths as the nation opens up. Fever clinics and emergency departments across the country are boosting the number of critical care beds to cope with rising hospitalization rate. Online medical services have been expanded, and a 3-tiered health system to effectively promote elderly medical treatments is in development. We're already seeing new challenges and big opportunities in 2022. Next year, the new COVID-19 policies will greatly impact growth prospects for the country and other economies. Back to you, Jianhua.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is our reporter, Bira, in the studio. And for more, we are joined via Skype by Professor Wu Jiwei. He's the director of the Center for Public Health Research at the Medical School of Nanjing University. Professor, welcome to our program. So first, a very quick question. How do you assess China's efforts in containing the pandemic over the past 3 years?
Well, actually, we just open up the society, abandon the nucleic acid testing. I think that it's critical that to how to deal with the elderly and the people who are highly vulnerable to the diseases. I think, over the past 3 years, we have applied strict measures against the virus, trying to minimize the infected individuals and avoid the overburden of the health systems. But once we open up, we have to face basically dealing with the severe diseases and preventing death. But I think this is something actually we need to focus on in the new period.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is Professor Wu Jiwei from Nanjing University. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
From record green output to drug affordability, better health access to stronger family ties, 2022 is China's year of ensuring its people's well-being. Take a look. As the country ramps up efforts to increase drug affordability for patients of rare diseases, to date, 45 kinds of orphan drugs used to treat 26 rare diseases have been included in China's National Medical Insurance Catalogue. And so far, more than 2,800 drugs have been included in China's National Medical Reimbursement List. Also this year, a unified national medical insurance information platform covering nearly 1.4 billion people has been completed, making medical services more efficient. Meanwhile, China's first law on family education was enacted this year. The Family Education Promotion Law specifies guardian and social responsibilities in family education, as well as state support. And China's space station is now in orbit, some 400 kilometers above the Earth. It is scheduled to become a science platform and benefit people on Earth. CGTN's Zheng Yibing reviews how the station was built up.
There have been 11 launch missions for China's Tiangong space station since April 2021, when the in-orbit assembly and construction began. China has sent 3 modules, 4 cargo ships, and 4 crewed spacecraft into low Earth orbit, some 400 kilometers above the Earth. And this basic configuration was formed during the process. The crews of Shenzhou 12 to 14 successfully completed a range of tasks. They did 7 extravehicular activities with assistance of the robotic arms, and 2 space lectures to students on Earth with ultra-high data transfer speed. On November 30, 2022, when the Shenzhou 15 crew entered the station, it was a historic moment of them embracing with the Shenzhou 14 crew and beginning their job transitioning in the spacious modules. The space station has begun functioning as a huge space lab, with 14 experimental cabinets with international standard couplings already installed in 3 modules to make new findings in life sciences, materials, and fundamental physics. And Tiangong welcomes international cooperation.
We've been making relevant technical preparations and discussing how we should select and train international astronauts.
There will be the expansion of the space station, for example, the Xuntian Space Telescope, that is to be launched around 2024. In the past 2 years, I was lucky to see the amazing technologies and the giant launch vehicles at 2 launch sites in China for the space missions. And I feel honored to get closer to the group of people who made all this happen.
This is a result of hard effort and total dedication within China's 30-year manned space program. I feel greatly honored to participate in this.
And with their contribution and international cooperation, the Tiangong space station will become a platform to realize many more space dreams for people on Earth. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
And earlier, CGTN spoke to Dr. Shivani Verma, an assistant professor at the Amity Institute of Space Science and Technology and Amity University, New Delhi. Dr. Shivani shared her thoughts on China's space technology development and how the international community could further cooperate with China in space exploration.
China has done a lot of work in development of different science projects. It is working in close collaboration with other space agencies like European Space Agency and NASA. The European Space Agency and China have been exchanging the data collected from European and Chinese satellites to advance Earth science research since 2004. As quoted by one of ESA administrator, China is doing the data exchange not for strategic purpose but also for benefiting the human mankind as a whole. There are a number of other extraterrestrial projects in pipeline which are going to be executed by China. Within the next decade, it plans to build a base at Moon's southern tip and from there deploy a telescope with 300 times the field of view of the Hubble. We can well imagine what view it is going to give to us about the origin of our universe, how interesting it is going to be. China has always emphasized very peaceful collaboration with international partners in space science and governance. It is using the data collected from ground stations in South America that is a key part of China's space infrastructure for surveillance purpose. They are exchanging a lot of data which is benefiting the human mankind as a whole in different fields, in different disciplines.
2022 is also a year for sports fans to celebrate. Now let's take a look at some of the most significant events. In February and March, Beijing hosted the Olympic Winters Game and the Paralympic Winters Game. China bagged 9 gold, 4 silver and 2 bronze medals to rank 3rd at the Winter Olympics, setting a new record in its Olympic Winter Games history. And China also set new records in its Paralympic Winter Games history by winning 61 medals. Also in February, China beat South Korea in the AFC Women's Asian Cup final, bringing home its 9th tournament trophy after a 16-year wait. And in October, China won all 8 matches to claim its 5th consecutive women's team title as the 2022 ITTF World Team Table Tennis Championships held in Chengdu, while the men's team defeated Germany 3-0 to lift the trophy for the 10th time in a row. And also in October, China marched its way into the final of the Women's Basketball World Cup for the first time in 28 years, eventually losing to the US 83-61 in the final. Still, the silver medal represented the nation's best, finishing the global showpiece since 1994. And 2022 witnessed the history being made during the Beijing Winter Olympics and Paralympics. For more, let's go live to our reporter Feng Yilei in Beijing. She's now at the Ice Cube, one of the venues. So Yilei, great to see you there. You cover the events in Beijing. Help us review some of the highlights and tell us what impressed you the most during your reporting.
Thank you, Zhenhua. As you just mentioned, I'm now with the iconic dual Olympic legacy known as the Ice Cube during the Winter Olympics. And this February, my colleagues and I were closely following curling games at this venue. And I think this is just a typical reflection of what differences this event has made to Beijing, the first city that hosts both Summer and Winter Olympic Games. So after the Winter Olympics, the venue was turned back to the water cube, serving as an aquatic center. But as you can see now, it's equipped with a new ice sports area of some 8,000 square meters, and it has become China's first world curling training center, and it is expected to receive more than 100,000 ice sports fans every year. And just like the Ice Cube, the Beijing Winter Olympics and Paralympics have greatly promoted post-game use of these venues to further develop winter sports, and they have highlighted the importance of carbon neutrality and sustainable use of water resources. And today, notably, this Ice Sports Center at the Ice Cube has just resumed operation to the public as China adjusts COVID policies. So I think it just reminds me of how Chinese organizers have worked closely with the International Olympic Committee, or the IOC, to host the big event as scheduled under the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we really had a smooth and safe experience inside a closed loop despite the virus that was still raging earlier this year. And that is thanks to over some 100,000 support staff, including some 2,000 medical workers and about 18,000 volunteers. And also with the introduction of advanced digital approaches, Beijing Winter Olympics reached a record-breaking global broadcast audience of more than 2 billion people. And the IOC President Thomas Bach says Beijing Winter Olympics is the most digitally engaged Winter Olympics in history. And the IOC has also acknowledged that all these efforts and collaboration have provided them with valuable experience, and the Beijing Games have set a benchmark for the future work of the IOC. And I think what also made history is the wide participation and equity of the Beijing Winter Olympics. So a total of over 2,800 athletes from 21 countries and regions took part, with women accounting for 45% of the total. I personally heard from several female medal winners and athletes from developing countries during the event that it was an opportunity for winter sports to develop in their countries, and among marginal groups. And it has also enhanced, of course, the enthusiasm for winter sports in China, especially among young people. And industries such as equipment manufacturing, tourism, leisure, and training for ice and snow sports also continue to boom. And Chinese government suggested late last year that over 346 million Chinese people have already engaged in winter sports from 2015, and that number is still growing. And now that the winter sports season is coming, I have already got out
we can
my
see that
souvenir
the winter sports will be boosted in China.
Yeah,
thank you very much for your insights. And of course, we can see that you have lots of good memories of there. So as one of the countries with the richest biodiversity in the world, China has been committed to continuously promoting environmental governance and biodiversity conservation. Now let's look at some key efforts China has made on environmental protection and this year. In 2022, 339 Chinese cities at and above the prefecture level experienced good and excellent air quality for an average above 80% of the days from January to August. Till this year, 90% of China's terrestrial ecosystem types and above 70% of the populations of the wild animals and plants under national key protection have been effectively protected. And the population of Asian elephants in the border province of Yunnan has reached about 360, and that of black and white snub-nosed monkeys, 3,800. And this year marks the 30th anniversary of China's accession to the Ramsar Convention. China leads the world in having the most international wetland cities, being home to 13 among all 43 such cities globally. In addition, China's first wetland protection law came into effect in June. And holding the presidency of COP15, China held the second phase this year in Montreal, Canada. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework aims at reversing biodiversity loss and setting the world on the path of recovery. The most significant part of the agreement is the commitment to designate 30% of Earth, land and sea agrees as protected areas by 2030. So far, only 17% of terrestrial and 10% of marine areas are protected. And now we have our guest Wu Chunhua to join us. The discussion, she is the Vice Chair of the Governing Council of the Asia-Pacific Water Forum. Great to have you there. So what would you say is the most significant milestone in terms of China's green development? And looking ahead to 2023, what will be the key focus?
Thank you for having me on the program. 2020 is definitely the year to celebrate for nature, and China has played a very significant role in that process. As the presidency of the COP15, China, working closely with all the other parties, has demonstrated its skillfulness in terms of diplomacy, expertise, as well as mindset in terms of cooperation, and successfully delivered the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. So now, actually, before 2030, global community will be able to work together to deliver all the targets we agreed upon at this moment. And then in the next 2 years, China's continued presidency will continue to help ensure all more details will be worked out so that all the targets will start to be implemented and deployed. Domestically, China also has so much to celebrate. As the news coverage just mentioned, so China has pretty much developed an integrated systematic national strategy that really pay attention to protection, restoration of nature. And one of the projects actually recognized during the Montreal negotiation by the UN is called, the Century Initiative from China as one of the 10 representative flagship projects for ecosystem restoration. That's very important to showcase in terms of the integrated way of thinking to connect the dots so that we'll be able to get all the efforts over the decades together in order to scale and very positively impacting the biodiversity, the wild, plants and the animals on this planet, particularly from China.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of international collaboration is needed. That is Ms. Wu Chunhua, Vice Chair of the Governing Council of the Asia-Pacific Water Forum. Thank you very much for your insight. The China Media Group has released its top 10 domestic news stories in 2022. They include the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, which saw the re-election of Xi Jinping as General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee. China's GDP in 2022 was estimated to exceed $17 trillion. China's economy has since continued to be a strong catalyst for the world's economic recovery. And China optimized its prevention and control measures for COVID-19 to balance safety with economic and social development. Last year, China's grain output hit a new record high and remained above 650 million tons for the 8th consecutive year. And China marked the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's return as President Xi said that one country, two systems had been tested in practice. Former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin passed away in Shanghai at the age of 96, and a memorial meeting was held in Beijing. And China achieved a historic breakthrough in the construction of its Tiangong space station. And China successfully hosted the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympics, with Chinese athletes achieving the country's best ever Winter Games results. China's second largest hydropower station entered full operation, marking the completion of the world's largest clean energy corridor along the Yangtze River. And U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, and the Chinese military conducted a series of joint combat training exercises in response. And that brings to the end of our stories from 2022. It's been an extraordinary year. Together we have experienced triumphs and excitement, and also challenges and struggles. Over the course of the year, China and the Chinese people have pulled through the difficulties and are ready to make new strides in 2023. As this year comes to an end and we all have our hopes and prospects for the next year, we wish you an early Happy New Year. And before we go, let's take a look at some of the special moments from 2022.
奥林匹克之光再度闪耀千年古都，北京2022年冬奥会开幕式圆满成功。
恭喜苏翊鸣！漂亮！中国队赢了！恭喜中国队创造了历史。 点火！中国梦越大，永远值得期待。
江山就是人民，人民就是江山。中国共产党领导人民打江山、守江山，守的是人民的心。